Let's get into the Belmont card at Saratoga for Saturday. Belmont Stakes Day, a huge day, top to bottom, and the graded stakes action gets started in race number 4. So I'm going to talk about a pick 4 that goes from races 4 through 7, all graded stakes races, with my good friend Ricky Henderson. Back in the day, he was Ricky for us. He was leadoff, but as things got going, he moved from Ricky to the main event. Now you're the main event. I was gonna say most weeks, most of the time, you're the heavy hitter. You're the feature. You're the feature. You're the one that's on the marquee most weeks, my man.
Hey, we'll move from Ricky Henderson to King Griffey Jr.
Exactly right. You move right up in the heart of the order there to another great, my friend. It's the third day that you and I have talked. We have a Thursday preview for anyone that might need a little bit of help with Thursday races. We looked at all the stakes races there and then the late pick 4. We looked at all 4 graded stakes races for Friday, and we're going to get things started for Saturday, taking a look at the True North, race number 4, the Poker, which is race number 5 at Saratoga. The Suburban is the 6th. The 7th is the Ogden Phipps. So those will be the early graded stakes races. And we want to build your bankroll for a big Saturday. Belmont Stakes packages, they are available right now. So the packages that you can actually purchase this week at shop.drf.com, you can get past performances and clocker reports for all 4 days at a really, really great price. You can see 50% off plus just by purchasing them all together. You can get them individually. You can get the clocker reports if maybe you're just someone who may need a little help with that particularly. So all 4 days, I just sent out a post a few moments ago. These things are up and ready to rock as of Wednesday night for Thursday. And then you'll have earlier than that, even for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday coming very soon. And then the webinar, which is going to be on Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Some very sharp minds, Andrew Beyer, Stephen Christ, David Aragona, will be hosting, the man that makes the morning lines there for all the races in New York. Barry, buddy, let's get it started. And then when we finish with our pick 4 analysis, we'll share a little more on the Belmont race in particular. The True North is a 6.5 furlong sprint. And there's an even money favorite on the morning line in here in race number 4. We can start the conversation with the number 5, Gun Pilot, who comes off of a grade 1 win. He won that 7 furlong race at Churchill Downs a few weeks ago and was very impressive that day. He earned a career best 101 Beyer speed figure. So comes off a really good effort. Prior to that, he was second at Oaklawn. And if you just look at his last few races, he's just got an upward pattern, an upward trajectory. And no, he's very honest. When you're trying to beat horses like this, one might say that he's not necessarily a speed horse, though, right? He's not slow, but he doesn't really work out his own trip up front. So maybe that's the way we beat him if we're trying to beat him in certain spots. We can start with him. He's the horse that I think will be a heavy, heavy favorite in here. Others, it's probably going to be like a few others all kind of vying for that second choice, I would say, right? I don't even know if there's like an overwhelming second choice. It could be creditive, maybe the 4, who comes off that runner-up effort behind Baby Yoda. Either one of them could take some money. The one that I thought was kind of interesting, Barry, was the 2, Rodney, a little bit. But talk to us about how you see the major player in here, Gun Pilot, and what are we going to do with him?
Yeah, Gun Pilot, I went back and I looked at that race, the Churchill Downs Stakes, and basically what I got out of it is that was the ultimate perfect trip for a horse like Gun Pilot.
It wasn't the really strongest group in the world either.
No, and that's what I was going to say. There was really 3 speed horses. They all hooked up. Gun Pilot was sitting outside, maybe a length or so off those 3 and kind of took over and took off. I can't envision a better trip any horse could ever have. And I think that's reflected in the speed figure he got. The Beyer was 101. That was his highest. And it seemed a little bit inflated considering who was in that race. Hear Me Song's a nice horse, likes to finish second a lot. Zozos was in there.
He was coming off a layoff. Zozos is like more of a miler too. That's just totally felt like a prep for him. Raise Cane, Hoist the Gold.
It was
they're not
okay. It was a
real
good
great.
field.
They're
Yeah.
more like grade 2, grade 3 horses, right? They're not grade 1 horses. So it may look a little inflated. And I agree with you. It's not that he can't win this race. It's that you're going to be now paying the price for
Hmm.
that win. And instead of getting the 5-1 and the $12 winner that you got last time out, well, you're going to be playing him off less than even money in here because, at least on paper, there isn't that strong second choice, right? And that's fine if you want to bet against him, which it sounds like you and I are fine playing against him, but
Oh yeah.
he's going to take a lot of money in here.
Yeah, he probably will, and hopefully he does because
Yep.
I really don't like him all that much, especially not at
He's
even
beatable.
money. Not at even money, and it seems like he's probably due for a letdown. I mean, you don't really see horses run this much this early in the year, to be honest. And they've been picking their spots, and he's been steadily improving. But this might be the field that kind of does him in. There seems to be a lot of speed in here. Rodney probably wants to go. Baby Yoda pretty much has to go, and gun it. I mean, but they're all horses that seem not to finish races, although Rodney does quite a bit more than the other two. But I think his chances might be compromised with all that speed from the outside. So Accreditive is definitely on the radar. That race back at Aqueduct last time, it was a pretty good race, even though Baby Yoda won that event. Um, it wasn't his best performance by any means, but it sets him up well for this race in
To come
particular.
back to Saratoga where he's been his best, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I was just gonna say he's been running. He's run well there. He's 3 for 4 in the money, 2 wins. He seems like he's rounding into form with Chad. Getting Irad back is definitely a plus.
Yep.
The other one that piqued my interest in this regard is 90% Maddie the One.
Yep.
Kind of almost the same sort of deal as Accreditive, and I think they're very close in talent and in ability, and it's just a matter of who gets to jump on who. As far
So
as
the race that we're watching as you're talking, the number 4 is 90% Maddie. I just wanted to pull it up while you're
Mhm.
talking because he had a tough trip last time out in a small field. As he's early on, he's the 4, right? So he's part of this battle across, and then they take back. So he shows that he can be more forwardly placed. Like he doesn't have to come from way out of it. But then all of a sudden, look where this horse ends up compared to where he was at the start. He ends up last on the inside. And he was right there battling with the leaders. So now he gets, ending up having to go all the way around. And he's fourth inside. He has to angle off the rail. There's no room. And then he has to tip all the way to the outside, 5 wide. He closes really well. And he's going to get beat by the horse
A
who gets a
neck.
perfect trip.
Yep.
Look at the 6. Joey Freshwater just sitting right off the lead. Here comes the 4. Now he has to tip outside. And he just misses there. I mean, that was a huge effort.
Yes, and it sets him up well for this race. I think if you really got Irad behind closed doors and you asked him about this race, I'm sure he'd want this one back.
Yep.
Because he probably should have won. He had the best horse in the race. It just had to go the extra mile, as they say, and go around everybody to try to win, and he almost pulled it off. I think he'll run back to that effort.
If you're not sure and you're looking at his form and you're not quite sure how good he is overall, the race to me that gives me a feel that this horse is really nice is the one where he's right there on the wire with Post Time. And Post Time's running in the Met Mile. This is a nice horse. This horse is 8 for 10 with the second and the third in his 10 starts. This is a legitimate horse. And so when he's right there on the wire with this horse, to me, that's a great measuring stick just to show that he can compete with this level of horse. Yeah, I will use a few in here in pick fours and stuff. And I did mention one of them. I think of the speeds, the one I like the most of the speeds is Rodney. So I want to use one of the speed horses in here because I do agree with you. Definitely there are versions of this race where you get Rodney, you get Gun It, and you get Baby Yoda all going. If someone clears, he's the fastest. And he's in really nice form overall, honestly. You can make just a couple of legit excuses for a few of his poor performances. He ran into the really sharp Super Chow, and The only races that he's been really getting beat lately were behind Super Chow, who's won 3 of his last 4, all of them graded stakes races, and has been in really nice form. And the other one was behind Bull Journey, who won 3 in a row. So behind some really sharp horses, he doesn't really want to sit. He's best going. So for him, it would be winning the battle of the speeds. That's how his version, like his probably best version of the race goes. But he's in the mix. The one, absolutely 90% Maddie's in the mix for me. And you mentioned accreditive, just as far as the horses that get the trip in here.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't even dismiss the 324 Mamba, because that horse is probably going to be the lone closer here. Um, I think, there's versions of this race
Yep.
where they really get quick up front, and it just leaves that horse by himself closing. And, you really can't knock anybody or for taking anybody in this race. I think this is a very competitive race. You definitely want to pick your price.
Race number 4 kicks off the pick 4. Races 4, 5, 6, and 7. Let's go to the 5th race. This one is the grade 3 poker. We're going a mile on the turf course in here. Shout out to the old vet, Casa Creed, 9-5 on the morning line, 9-time winner. So he has 4 grade 1 wins. But we always got to mention as these horses get a little bit older, because one thing is undefeated, Father Time. It may not be now, but it catches up with you at some point. He's 8, and he only has 2 races since November. So there's always that possibility of horses like this losing a little bit of a step, right? Especially he's traveled, he's come back. Maybe that took a little more out of him. He's had a bunch of traveling throughout his career, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he's a cool horse, though. He's such a nice horse to root for. I feel bad even when I point out things like that, right? It's like, oh, I don't even want to say bad thing about Casa Creed. But from a gambling standpoint, for a horse who's always going to be bet now because of his reputation, he's not an unbeatable horse. He's just a really honest horse that shows up, and he runs great at Saratoga.
Yeah, he's a really, really nice horse. And like you said, the questions are, he came out of that race in Maidon. He didn't really run all that great. He didn't run all that badly either. He was just, it was off kind of a decent sized layoff. But I don't know what to make of him. But at 9-5, I probably don't want any part of him because he's 8 years old.
Yeah.
He can definitely win this race, but I wouldn't want to put a dime on him at 9-5 personally. And there's other ways to go. I think the 1 is really, really, really interesting here. Mysterious Night. I see him on the line at 10-1, and half of me thinks that he's not going to be 10-1. And then I look again, and I was like, well, maybe he might, because his 2 times here in the States, he didn't run all that great. He didn't run bad at Woodbine back in September 2022. And kind of won going away against a field that was way lesser, even though it was a grade 1. That field was way, way lesser.
Yeah.
Then came back last year in the Hall of Fame at Saratoga and lost to Carl Spackler. But this race sets up a lot differently. There's hardly any speed in here. And, Buick is a heads-up kind of rider, and Charlie Appleby, they know what they're doing. And I thought it was telling that Buick didn't come over to ride him in Saratoga last year. But he does come back this year to ride in this race. So I think he might be a lot liver than what the morning line maker may have thought, because he can go to the front, especially in a race like this. Same thing with Talk of the Nation.
Yeah.
They kind of have the same sort of profile. And Talk of the Nation, I think, is a very, very good horse who's been very, very unlucky for a little while now. He got scratched, I think it was on Derby Day last year.
Yep.
And he's just
American
had
turf.
tough luck ever since. I mean, he won 1 race, but he's been second, just missing like 3 or 4 times. So I'm definitely going to give him a shot, because that 7-2 is probably solid. Ice Chocolate is another one that I think may end up running well in this spot. This horse kind of looks like he's going off form, but I don't think he likes to be on the inside, and I think they found that out last time.
Talk of the Nation he'll probably get the dictate things from out there. The 1 Mysterious Night shouldn't be too far out of it. I mean, if you're talking about the short prices, which of the two I prefer. Like, I'd much prefer Carl, I think, over Casa Creed just in this moment, in this time, because he's just more versatile and he's more of an up and coming horse. And it seems like he's got more steps forward to take. He's only making his second start as a 4-year-old. He's done very little wrong. He has the one poor race, and it was the American Turf. That was actually the race we were just talking about where he had a little trouble. Other than that, he's been good, and he can track if they're going pretty slow. He ran down Talk of the Nation last time out. They'll both come back and be even a little sharper here. Second start off the bench. Of the short prices, I would prefer him. Of other horses to maybe throw in, like as you're pointing out, might not be that much speed. Wouldn't be shocked to see Kubrick run well here with Pratt, because Pratt is great at this, knowing when last time out he had Kubrick pretty close, and so maybe it was that this horse didn't want to be that close. I honestly think it might have just been the field. That was like a really tough group in that Maker's Mark. Just go through those horses. Master of the Seas, Naval Power, Integration, any one of them. Emmanuel won this race last year, I think.
Yep.
So like we're looking at horses who would all be really, really tough in this spot. And so I think that was just one of those races where, because if you're just looking at the speed figure, he actually ran a pretty good speed figure, even though he was just overmatched. So he's one for me too that I might throw in. But I'm glad you mentioned Talk of the Nation. I'm glad you mentioned the one Mysterious Night too, because he was also a major question mark. And the more I started digging into him, I felt just like you. He can sit a good trip. And in here, that's going to go a long way, because he's just coming out of shorter races also. So you just expect him to be more forward, kind of like the trip that he sat when he won at Woodbine. That would be something just like we like, within a few lengths.
Yep.
Race number 5, the Grade 3 Poker. It's the second leg of this kind of middle pick 4 here from races 4, 5, 6, and 7. Let's turn the page, Barry, to race number 6. We have the Grade 2 Suburban. And in this one, we have a horse who definitely wishes this was the Suburban being run at Belmont Park. That's Charge It, who is one of the better Belmont horses. And it's really interesting with him. This is a horse who, it's going to come off like I'm knocking him right now. And I'm not. This horse is a very nice horse. He was a runner-up in the Florida Derby. He's been good all along. But when you dive into his form, he has 14 races overall, 8 races at Gulfstream and Belmont, 4 wins, 3 seconds, and a 4th. Then he has 6 races elsewhere: Churchill, Oaklawn, Saratoga, Santa Anita, and Aqueduct.
Nowhere.
He has a 3rd, 3 fourths, a 5th, and the 17th in the Derby. I mean, we're not going to hold that against him, but it just goes to the point that he's been awesome at Belmont and at Gulfstream. And, all the other tracks, not so much.
Yeah, he really hasn't been awesome outside of those places. And at 5-2, he's tough to take with his inconsistency. And it's like, what is he going to do in this race? I mean, it's kind of one of those things. He's either going to run away from this whole field and win by like 10, or you're not going to find him. And lately, we haven't been finding him.
No.
So at 5-2, he's hard to take. And Krupi's another one. I mean, I don't know how you can like this horse at all. And he's 3-1 on the line. I just can't see it.
I'm cold on both of them too.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And even the other one, Bendug.
He's really I'm fine more with him than the other two, but he's a real
suspect.
enigma too, right? I mean, I don't know who he's beat in his races here. He was all right. Good in those races in Maidon. I mean, he's been impressive and he's been like kind of versatile here, but I think this is a fun race to take a swing because of how you just said it.
Side horses.
I had the 1 and the 2.
Yeah, I like Mass Parade actually quite a bit here. I
cool.
think
Talk to us about the 3.
Has a lot of talent. Kind of got derailed after he won got beaten by Art Collector back last year in the Knicks Go. And he seems to have regained his form, and I think going long, the longer the better for this horse.
Yeah.
You see that he kind of broke out in the Temperance Hill at Oaklawn, which was a nice race. He beat Classic Causeway who isn't very much, but he's decently talented. Um, and then kind of finished way behind next, who kind of ran away. So I'm not going to hold that against him. But this horse, that 95 buyer he got in March in the Temperance Hill, is reminiscent of what he was doing before he kind of
Yeah.
got derailed. I
This
don't
was
know
a
if he
nice
got
horse,
hurt.
man. He was in the
Right.
Jim Dandy and then the Travers. And because last year, coming out of the Alydar, he was off a long layoff and he ended up, he was like 8-1 on the morning line when he ran in that Knicks Go because I liked him. He was my top pick when I went through the race, and then he got bet down and he ended up going off favorite at like 7-2 in a really wide open race. And as you were hitting on, he just was off form for that chunk of races. For whatever it was, all of last year, just eliminate 2023, honestly. Like there's something was off with him. He did not run
Absolutely.
really like he didn't really run any good races. The one at Indy was okay. Other than that, and maybe there was something physical that may have been bothering him. Who knows, right? It could have been anything. But when he came back this year, it's all made more sense. He needed
Hmm.
the first race. It was a setup race to get him back and get him fit. They stretched out going longer. He was better. And he hasn't been showing it as much lately, but he has more positional speed. He doesn't need to be as far back as he's been in those races. Like, he doesn't have to be dead last.
Well, it seems like he's working his way back,
Yeah.
because the race that he won, the Temperance Hill, you see the positioning he had.
More
If
mid
he
pack, like
has
3 or 4 off. That's what you
right,
want, right?
and I think that's a product of the distance, and I think that's what suits him well, and I think he's going to run well in this spot. He might not win, but I'm definitely going to give him a shot. Signator is another one who I think
That's my other horse. He ran into Next,
the
who is
longer
just
the
really
better.
cool to mention. Like
Hmm.
this was the horse that beat your horse Masquerade last time. Who's just an absolute monster at these distance races. He's won his last 3 by 11, 25, and 11 3/4 with 104 and 105 buyer speed figures. So when you look down and you see that Masquerade got well defeated, everybody gets well defeated by Next in a marathon race. But Signator, man, he was a horse that I put in my stable mail and in my alerts because I play in some of these fantasy horse racing leagues. So I'm always looking for like a bunch of 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds before the Derby races because you're drafting a bunch of these horses in those leagues. So he was a horse that I picked Signator in one of these leagues. And then his 3-year-old season, you could just kind of see he never was able to get things going. He missed all from October to August. So he didn't get a chance anything in his 3-year-old season until maybe 3 races in. Then he starts shaking off the rust. And then you start seeing the horse he was supposed to be because he's just not a fast horse early. He's a distance horse. I've been waiting for him to go a trip like this for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think this race sets up for him well too, especially being on the inside. This is a really strange race because the horses that are going to get bet are very, very shaky. I'm not really sure how they're going to bet this race, but I definitely want the 1 and the 3, and then I like the 2 a little bit too. This
You
horse
could sit a
has
really
won at
nice
the
trip.
distance. He's won at the distance also. He's 2 for 3 in the money with 1 win. Um, but I mean, just the fact that I don't like the horses that might be bet puts this one on my radar because this horse has won at the distance and can kind of get it done if things kind of flow the right way. And it might because this is a really weird race. The pace scenario looks a little murky. Kuchar could actually get to the lead,
I know. I
and
think
and
he's
and kind of coast
It just
if
depends
things
on what
work
they do
out.
with the outside horse, who maybe they send because he sent last time and that worked. But I that's why I have to have the 2 in pick 4s in this race
Mm-hmm.
because I'm pretty confident at the trip he's going to sit more than anyone in here. He almost always sits that really nice trip a couple lengths off, and that might be enough to actually just by
Yep, get him
default
over the
inherit
top.
the lead here
Yep.
or be just really, really in an advantageous spot compared to the rest of the field. And again, with Pratt, he's so good with the speed horse in a race where there's not that much speed or a kind of speed horse to get them in a really good spot. Yeah, it's a let's compare the horse that beat Kuchar 2 starts back, Messier. He loses by 5 lengths to Messier. Messier beats Charge It by 4 lengths last time, and Charge It's 5-2, and Kuchar's 8-1. And I know we can't, that's not the only reason why, but when you're just looking at that and you're playing that kind of game, he's been doing the same sort of thing lately as a horse like Charge It. He's going to sit the same sort of trip as a horse like Charge It, and he's going to be 3 times the price. So,
yeah, I mean, he's very enticing, especially at that price.
yeah, and then I guess to the outside, as we were saying, I'm a little more okay with Ben Duke than you, but he is just such a wild card because his big races came recently, and I have no idea who and like what quality he's been defeating. He is going to go third off the bench, and he does have some versatility to him. So he got the lead last time, and he definitely doesn't need the lead. And if you eliminate the Dubai World Cup race where he was just well beaten, those races before that, they're not bad. He's never really running bad races. I want to be a little careful because I think he's going to get hit hard here. Because what you and I have been talking about, like the other two, I don't think are nearly as enticing, like Krupi or Charge It. This horse is more of a hasn't been beat a bunch. We haven't seen him beat a bunch of times. He's more of like a face that I think people are looking for, kind of a new face in this race. So I think if you can beat him, you can really get rewarded in this race.
Well, you know, the thing that's odd to me is the race selection since he's been over here, where
Yeah.
he's been running. And it's just like, well, why are you running this horse here? Like, I can see running that first race in that allowance race. But you would think a horse with that kind of back class
Try a little something tougher. It almost discourages you that Mott was so
right, and then he drops him into an optional
cautious.
claimer.
Yeah. And Ben Duke makes his third start off the bench on the outside. Probably the horse to beat in here.
Tough
Looks like
read, man. This whole race is a tough read, to be
you have
honest.
Krupi coming back from Maidan, and you have Charge It, who's just not necessarily in his best of form right now. And those three will take a lot of money in here. Could get some really nice value with horses down on the inside, like the 1, 2, and 3, who all look very, very playable here. So keep an eye on them. Let's close out this pick 4, Barry, with one of the better horses in training right now. And we were seeing some of the excited folks watching Idiomatic in the morning recently out at in her like recent training. I think she was at Saratoga, and she just had got there, and she was really standing out. So Idiomatic, she's 3-5. She's just a cool horse, man. She was great last year, and then she comes back after a really good last year. And she can sit a little bit. I mean, the way you're going to beat her, if you are going to beat her, is just kind of probably on the lead, like pushing her and somebody else coming and getting them. Because while she can sit, I don't think that's necessarily the trip they would pick. They want her to be on the lead or right off of a target and then able to kind of do whatever she wants. And she's really cool. You expect that she'll probably be even sharper now with that race under her belt. And she got 5 weeks to come back since then. And it just comes down to, what kind of race shape is it? It's a small field. She scares a lot of other fillies and mares off.
Yeah, she certainly does. I mean, she's been the goods as advertised. But it seems like this race might get a little hot up front. I
In
know
a small field, I agree.
Survive that pace. She probably will. Whether she wins or not is another story. I know she's good enough. We've seen her pull this kind of thing off previously at Keeneland.
Probably the 1 and the 2 both, right?
Yeah, well, not only that, but the outside horse may be able to put pressure
to her outside and stay close enough with the jockey that we're just talking about. A guy who gets this exact situation, knowing that, okay, cool, let me just make her work a little bit harder from the outside as she's also having to work a little bit harder trying to keep up with the horses to her inside.
Right. And I like Raging Sea quite a bit in this spot.
I think she sits a really good trip. I do too.
I mean, if you're going to play against Idiomatic, the only 2 that I could come up with here were the 6, Raging Sea, and the 4, Sullivan Angel.
Those are the ones, right?
And they, beyond that, it's going to be tough. Yes.
Because if you're going to beat her, she was involved on the front end, and I think they went too fast. I don't think you're outrunning her, and I don't think she's going to be caught way behind them. I think it's going to be somebody else, just like you said. The two that I had mapped out were the 4 and the 6. If you're trying to beat her here,
Yeah, I mean, Pretty Mischievous hasn't been the same. She, I don't know, she came off that cotillion and ran in the La Truenne, and she just didn't look good at all. I mean, just nothing, no punch, no nothing from her.
how
She
can we
kind of
look at
ran
that
this,
race against Idiomatic and try to
and
get?
seeing her turn the tables.
I know, because we can expect Idiomatic to be better second start back
And
too
honestly, I think the distance
for
is up
her.
against it for her. I think she's more of a miler, seven
I
furlong
agree.
type.
I think so too. So that's what ends up happening in this race, right? You kind of do the process of elimination and you get to, okay, Randomize and Tizzy in the Sky. I personally don't like their chances in this race because I think both of their best chances are on the front end. And I think both of them are going to be inside of Idiomatic.
Hmm.
So both of them I kind of eliminate. Now, if those two and Idiomatic get caught up, well, that opens things up for Raging C, who could be sitting right out there. And as you're pointing out, maybe Pratt even has to be paying attention to Idiomatic. So maybe he's moving a little bit early or really working on trying to get Idiomatic to get softened up a little bit. And then here comes the 4, Soul of an Angel, who was really good in that Ruffian last time out. And she's just a closer in this race. You know what you're going to get from her. She's going to drop back, hope they go quick, and just try to launch late.
Yeah, I just think Raging Sea is going to get a great trip because
She
she's
just
going to
and just she just
press.
seems
She's
better.
going to make. She's going to force Idiomatic to run, basically. Because
She
if she
seems
doesn't,
better.
right, if she doesn't, Idiomatic can just sit right behind those two speeds and kind of let them back up into her, and she can just go right around them. With Raging Sea there, she's going to have to get out and go a little bit because she doesn't want that horse to get her spot. If they were
And
smart, they would try to force the issue, but we'll see. I mean, Raging Sea at 9-2 might be a really, really good bet.
so on April the 19th, it was her first start as a 4-year-old. She draws the rail. She settles just behind the leaders. She's not even 2 lengths off. She always traveling well. She angles around. Easy victory. In that race, she beats a horse named Scylla. Scylla comes back last weekend at Churchill Downs. Really impressive, winning the Shawnee, the grade 3 Shawnee, with a 93 Beyer speed figure that day. So you're looking at the form that Raging Sea has recently, and it's good. She's proven at a mile and an eighth. She's proven at Saratoga. She's going to make her second start as a 4-year-old, so she could take a big step forward. She's going to make her second start off of that layoff. And we just pointed out the race that she comes out of is live. She's really tough to knock overall. And she's the type of horse who, in any other races, she's not playable prices. Look, the last 5 times she's run, she's been 5-2 or under. And in this race, you might get 5-1,
That'd
depending
be
on
fantastic.
how much Idiomatic gets bet. Somewhere between 7-2 and 5-1, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so it's a really good spot for her. It is for Raging Sea. Can she continue to step forward? Because she'll have to keep up with Idiomatic. But what Raging Sea ran last time out was just what Idiomatic ran.
Yep.
So is it all of the deepest fields in this pick 4 sequence? No, but we found some vulnerable favorites, at least a couple that we think are vulnerable and some playable prices in this sequence. So 4, 5, 6, and 7, 12:30 Eastern time. And we'll get you started with that pick 4. It's going to go race 4, 5, 6, and 7. But we can skip to race number 12, Barry, talk a little bit more about the Belmont. Talk to a lot of different handicappers. You're going to get a lot of different opinions on this one. But as you and I spoke about this field yesterday, when we were looking at the Friday races, you were mentioning the Wine Steward as one of the intriguing long shots and in price plays that you had in there. And then I think you talked about Dan too, just really liking Dan as well.
Yeah. Because I think how it kind of broke this down is there's going to be kind of 3 flights of horses. You got your speeds, the middle horses, and then the closers. And I think those 2 in particular are going to sit right in that second flight. the Wine Stewart and Mystic Dan. They both have good speed to get position. They'll be behind Seize the Gray, possibly. Dornock, you would think, would want to go to the lead here too. And the outside horse, Mindframe, is going to have to get involved. Then you have your second flight horses, probably Resilience, Mystic Dan, and the Wine Stewart right next to each other too. Um, but I like the Wine Stewart a little bit more because I think this horse is sitting on a good race, ready to kind of break through. I know people are going to say, oh, well, he couldn't get the mile and eighth last time. He loomed up and kind of quit on Antiquarian as the favorite. But I think that prepared this horse better for this race, going a mile and a quarter. Um, it just remains to be seen what kind of unfolds. I mean, honestly, I still think Mystic Dan is probably a lot better than people are giving him credit for, even though he did win the Derby. I still think he's a little undervalued in a sense because he really should be